Luke chapter 18. So if it's a hard copy or a digital copy, or if you print it off like I do, grab a copy. We are going to stand in just like 2 seconds, but not yet. Luke 18. We're in a series called Your Kingdom Come. Your Kingdom Come. And we are looking at Jesus as our King, as our servant, as our Savior, as he brings to life God's rule into human lives. Last week, we were introduced to a rich ruler that, unfortunately, he kept the commandments, but he missed the king, right? He missed the king because he walked away believing, broken and sad, because he could not imagine a life richer than the one that he already possessed. And as the rich ruler fades into the crowd, Jesus, in our text this morning, is going to bring the 12 disciples close, and he's going to introduce and reveal to them that everything written will be accomplished. And that the real treasure, the ruler walked away from, is about to be purchased at the cross. That's what we're going to see in our text this morning. So if you are there, now you can stand with me if you're able to as we read out of Luke 18, starting in verse 31 together. It says this: "And taking the 12, he said to them," that's Jesus, "See, we are going up to Jerusalem, and everything that is written about the Son of Man by the prophets will be accomplished. For he will be delivered over to the Gentiles and will be mocked and shamefully treated and spit on. After flogging him, they will kill him, and on the third day he will rise." Verse 34. "But they understood none of these things. The saying was hidden from them, and they did not grasp what was said." God, this morning, I pray that as we study your word together, as we look at your text, God, I pray that we would see what you have to say to us, that we would understand your word, that we would take it and apply it to our lives, and that you would be made great this morning. Amen. And thanks for standing. You guys can have a seat. So this morning, I want us to look at kingdom optics, right? I want us to make sure that as we look at these kingdom optics, the question I want us to answer is this. If you're a note taker, write this question down. How do we position ourselves for the King to open our eyes? How do we position ourselves before the person of Jesus and our understanding of who he is for him to open our eyes? I've got 3 things that I believe that we need to do. Number 1, we need to fix our focus on the cross, right? We need to position ourselves to have the King open our eyes. We have to first fix our eyes on, our focus on the cross. Verse 31 is what he says. He says, "See, we are going up to Jerusalem." The city of Jerusalem was about 3,300 feet higher than the city of Jericho, okay? Which Jericho is specific because it's going to be in the text in just a minute. Jerusalem actually set higher than a lot of its surrounding cities. And we know that because several times a year, there would be festivals held in Jerusalem, and they would pilgrimage to Jerusalem for these festivals. And actually, you can read in the book of Psalm 120 through 134, it's called the Songs of Ascent, which are the songs that they would sing, that the pilgrims would sing as they moved from wherever they're from to the city of Jerusalem, to the temple. And as they progress closer, the songs change, what they're crying out to, what they're singing before the Lord. So total side note, but it's a very interesting study. If you need a new Bible study, go study the Songs of Ascent. It's fantastic. But my point is, as they went up to these festivals, they would travel, elevation-wise. But Jesus, in this moment, we're going to see that he is the true pilgrim, and he's heading up to offer the truest sacrifice, which is himself on our behalf. And so going up isn't just geographically about geography, but it's also about theology. Because Jesus, in this moment, Jerusalem is where redemption will be accomplished. And he begins this journey, not in this moment, but all the way back in Luke chapter 9, is when he begins to set his focus on Jerusalem. This is what Jesus says in 9:51. He says, when the days drew near for him to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. And so I go back to Luke chapter 9 because I want us to see that even in this moment, in this morning's text in 18, this is not an accident, right? For Jesus, the cross is not an accident. It has always been the plan. It has been his plan from the beginning, and he knew that it would happen, and he's not guessing, he is accomplishing, right? So when he says in verse 31 that everything written would be accomplished, just for a brief clip of events, if you would, to quickly fly through the Bible for us. This is what he means when he says everything. Genesis chapter 22, it's the provided lamb. Exodus 12 is the Passover blood that shields us from judgment. Isaiah 53 is the suffering servant, and it says that it would be pierced for our transgressions, right? This is things that he's answering and doing and fulfilling all over the book. In Psalm 22, it tells us that he would be mocked, he would be surrounded, that his hands and his feet would be pierced. In Daniel 7, it tells us that the Son of Man is receiving everlasting dominion, that it was only after humiliation that the enthronement would come. And in Zechariah chapters 12 and 13, the struck shepherd is seen as a fountain opened for sin. He's not guessing. Jesus, in these moments, over and over and over again in Scripture, and now again in Luke 18, he is fulfilling prophecies. And he comes to name the steps here: mockery and shame, spitting and flogging, death and his resurrection. And he's showing the disciples and us that the kingdom comes through a cross before it comes through a crown. And if you read and see in our text this morning, the tension begins to build in verse 34. Because if you understand what's going on here, this is the third time that Jesus has told them and foretold his death. This is the third time that he sat with them and explained what is about to happen. But in verse 34, we can feel this tension because this is when Jesus says, they understand none of these things. It was hidden from them. The disciples, they heard him preach. They followed him from city to city and watched him perform miracle after miracle. They sat at tables and ate with him. They were face to face with the Messiah, and yet they were unable to understand what was actually about to happen right in front of them. I grew up in Oklahoma. I haven't done it in many years, but I enjoy hunting and fishing, and so I got really familiar with these in a deer stand. And now I just like taking them to Colorado to watch animals like elk and bear and sheep and ram, okay? You guys didn't think this was as funny as the last two. These are massive, okay? These aren't actually my binoculars. These are like made for a tripod. Anyway, but for illustration purpose. Binoculars, if you're not familiar with them, it allows you to look at something really far away. And somebody's out in the lobby. I think it's my wife. It'd be weird if it wasn't, I'm just staring at somebody. But it isn't. It is her, so it's not weird. Anyway, it takes something that's really far away, and it brings it close, and it brings it into focus so we can see it clearly. If you've ever used a really nice pair of binoculars correctly, you know that if whatever you're looking at is still, it almost feels like you can reach out and touch it until you move the binoculars and you realize that it's actually really far away. For me, as a kid at least, probably still as an adult, every once in a while you just want to mess around with stuff and you just figure out what else it can do, so you turn them around. Anybody else turn binoculars upside down? And you look at them this way. And instead of taking something really far away and making it look close, when you flip them upside down and the optics work backwards, you can actually take something really close and it still look really far away. Like I have the whole page. I see the whole page still, Anybody ever do that as a kid? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it doesn't work, but it's fun. You usually run into your siblings and then you hurt and get in trouble and you have a fight. But this is exactly what was going on with the disciples in this text, right? They were so close to Jesus. They walked with him. They saw him. They were so near to him. They traveled with him. They heard him preach. But they were watching and seeing it and looking through the wrong end of the binoculars. Because they were expecting a throne instead of understanding that it was actually going to be a cross that he would go to. Or the disciples wanted him to come in as a ruler and overthrow Rome and take control of Rome, not embrace sin and defeat sin for them. This is what they understood, right? They were so close to the cross, right in front of them, but it looked distant. It looked unnecessary, almost irrelevant to the disciples, because they had the cross was not in focus for them. But if you'll take the binoculars and you'll turn them around and you begin to put the cross into focus, what was once blurry begins to snap back into clarity. And then you realize that the kingdom doesn't come by skipping suffering. It comes by Jesus actually embracing it for us. So this morning I would ask us this question. What expectations are blurring your view of Jesus? What are you holding incorrectly? What are you holding or looking through a pair of binoculars the wrong way? Because I believe that some of us in this room are a lot closer to the cross. You're a lot closer to freedom. There are many of you in this room who have had a lot of questions about church and the person of Jesus and salvation, and you are a whole lot closer to salvation. There are some believers in this room who are a whole lot closer to maturity in your faith than you realize. You are right there, and yet you are looking at it the wrong way, and it feels really far away for you. But you are so much closer than you think you are because you don't have the cross in focus. And I believe that it's really easy for churches in America today to lose focus of the cross, and I believe many have. And so I would tell us this morning, Bridge Fellowship, if we're going to let King Jesus reveal himself to us, we first need to fix our focus on the cross. Secondly, we need to hold fast to a hearing faith. We have to hold fast to a hearing faith. This is what I mean. Look at verses 35. As he drew near to Jericho, a blind man was sitting by the roadside begging. I told you we'd get to Jericho eventually. Hearing the crowd go by, he inquired what this meant. And they told him, Jesus of Nazareth is passing by. And he cried out, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. And those who were in front rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he cried out all the more, Son of David, here, have mercy on me. So as we move down the road to Jericho, we have to understand that Jericho is a threshold city to the land of Israel, okay? So it was a moment for us in this text. We see this true Yeshua, Jesus, approaching a greater promised life of sight and salvation. He is accomplishing even more now. And we have to understand that in the first century, blindness would have been considered something that would have meant total marginalization, right? They would have been totally outcast. There's no social safety net for them. There's no ADA compliance in this moment. There's no job prospects for them. For a blind person, a blind beggar, you survived by sitting or standing near heavily trafficked areas, hoping and praying that somebody would be generous to you. And so in this moment, we see this blind man, he references Jesus as the son of David, which is important. Like if I were you, I would highlight that and then that, circle it. Because in verse 37, the crowd tells him that Jesus of Nazareth is passing by. But he calls him and cries out to the son of David. So something changes. And it's important for us to recognize what changes, because the title, Son of David, would have been a royal messianic title. To me, it's important because what it tells me is this blind man cannot see the road. He cannot see the crowd. He does not see Jesus himself walking down the road. But he recognizes royalty. He recognizes salvation. He recognizes a moment of healing. And when the crowd says it's Jesus coming, he says, I know who that is. And he is the Messiah. And so he calls out to him. Sight isn't just about eyes. Sight is about recognition. 2 weeks ago, Pastor Pete talked about being desperate, right? To have a heart of desperation for Jesus. And for me, when I read this text, what I see is desperation, once again, refusing to be domesticated. They try to hush him. It says the crowd rebuked him, silenced him. But if you understand the text, it just intensifies the verb. It says that he continued to shout. He kept shouting. The more they silenced him, the more he cried out for healing. Takes me to Romans 10. Reminds me that faith comes from hearing, and hearing from the word of Christ. This blind man hears, and his faith erupts. And you see this moment where the disciples have followed Jesus through his entire ministry. And they have all this information. They have all this, what should be understanding. But all it is information, and there's no illumination. And there's nothing that's being brought to clarity for them. But in this moment, you see somebody who has very little information. But because the information he does have and does believe, it illuminates his understanding. And he knows one important thing, the most necessary thing that we see this blind man tell us. And it's he knows who Jesus is, and he knows what he needs. This blind man reveals to us that he understands wholeheartedly who Jesus is, but he also recognizes what he needs. And so this is what happens. I don't know if you're a parent, if you've ever had that moment where your 6-year-old or 5-year-old tries to one hand that brand new gallon of milk into the bowl of cereal, like on their tippy toes on the counter, right? They are fully confident that they have it, right? But bless their heart, we know that is followed by several towels and sit-down lesson that hopefully you handled better than I do of you don't, in fact, have it, right? For us, the kingdom begins and the kingdom starts when we are willing and able to admit that we, in fact, do not have it. And I would challenge you and remind you, self-admission is so much more valuable than letting noise or hurry, and honestly, the voice of well-meaning religious people who are going to silence and mute your cry for mercy. And I would encourage you to refuse that silencing. If you know who Jesus is and you know what you need, then you cry out to the person of Jesus that you know can provide that thing. And as people, and as hurry, and as shame, and as people who very much may mean well for you, begin to silence your cry for mercy, I would challenge you to refuse the silencing. Continue to cry out for mercy. We need to fix our focus on the cross. We need to hold fast to a hearing faith, and we need to walk in obedient vision. Look at verse 40. This is the moment where they begin to interact. It says, Jesus stopped and commanded him to be brought to him. And when he came near, he asked him, what do you want me to do for you? He said, Lord, let me recover my sight. And Jesus said to him, recover your sight. Your faith has made you well. And immediately he recovered his sight. He followed him, glorified God, and all the people, when they saw it, gave praise to God. So the one that is upholding the galaxy, who possesses all, pauses and stops what he's doing for the single voice on the roadside. He commands for him to come to him, and he asks him what I would tell you is the most dignifying question that we could ask, that he could ask. He says, what do you want me to do for you? If you're a journaler or you write in your margin of your Bible, that should be underlined, highlighted, asterisk, circled. And if you don't, today would be a great day to start, because it is a question that Jesus is asking you and I, not just to hit the blind beggar in the text, but for you and me as well. Verse 41, what do you want me to do for you? And then the beggar answers with holy clarity. He doesn't make it confusing. He doesn't get timid. He responds to Jesus and says, Lord, let me recover my sight. And immediately, it says, he sees and follows Jesus and gives glory to the Lord. Michaela and I just got to take our first cruise. So we celebrated 10 years of marriage, and we went on a cruise. Never been on one before. I'm not a sand person. I don't like the beach. I go anyway. The cruise was great because we got to get off the boat, touch sand, and then get right back on a boat. So if you've been on cruises before, maybe it's a hot take, but I'd much rather stay on the boat than get off, personally. But it was a blast. We had a lot of fun. But one of the ports we went to was in Cozumel. And we thought really smart, don't take credit cards because you don't want to get stolen and things like that. So we just took a little bit of cash as we got off the boat. And we're frugal, we're cheap. We're from the very beginning planning this trip, we're not going to pay for excursions. We're just do our own thing. So we get off the boat in Cozumel, and there's people standing with signs and saying stuff and asking you to do this or do that. And we're like, ooh, it's only $75. Let's rent a moped. Okay, so we rented a moped. Yeah, this is great. Okay. That's actually what I looked like on the moped for like 3 hours. But this is a picture that was taken before what I'm about to tell you. All right, so just lock that fun, excitement, set up a tripod, take a selfie photo in your mind, and then that was about how long I lasted, okay? Because about this moment is when we realized we are halfway across the island of Cozumel, which I understand is not very big, but we are literally as far away as we possibly could be from port. And that's in that moment we realized we only have $25 left because we only took $100 cash off the boat. We are gonna need about 8 to 10 of that to fill this thing back up with gas, which means we have like $10, $15 for food and all of the things that that we're gonna buy and take home. So we start kind of freaking out, and Google Translate was of zero help. All the ATMs were in Spanish, we got so desperate we actually went to like a standing bank, thinking that you could go. Sorry, this is funny reliving this. That you could go into a foreign country and ask them to call your bank at home to give you cash. I understand saying it out loud for the third time today. That sounds wild, but we thought it was gonna work. It didn't. So after doing all this stuff that we thought was gonna work, we finally realized that if we don't go back to the boat, this 10-year anniversary romantic cruise to Cozumel was not gonna be that much longer. And to avoid a passionate conversation, we decided to finally go back to port and actually get what we needed. So we went back. My next bad decision was I left Michaela in all the shops and I just went to the boat, which apparently that was not responsible either. But she's here, so that's good. Anyway, went and got money. It was awesome. We started shopping, and we met this guy. His name's Santiago. Spoke really good English because he had lived here for a while. And I said, hey, man, I don't want to eat at Senor Frog's. I don't want to eat at all these every place that everybody else eats that's just as fake as at home. I want real, authentic Mexican food. He was like, follow me. This is the third bad decision. So he takes us down 2 blocks. We turn, walks down another block, turns again. And I looked at Michaela and I was like, this is either going to be the greatest moment ever or we're going to be the next Netflix series. We're here, so that's good. And we sit down. I was like, hey, why don't you stay and eat with us? So we bought us lunch. It was awesome. By far the best Mexican food I think I've ever eaten in my entire life. Michaela got some chorizo. I got some enchiladas with some mole sauce, which was so good. Oh my gosh, it was so good. But then, tell him thanks. He also obviously owned a shop. And so then we went and bought authentic hand-woven bags from him. And Michaela definitely spent more money than we should have. So hindsight, I should have left it on the boat. But all jokes aside, the best part of the day didn't happen until we went back to the source of what we needed and of what we lacked. Some of us are circling the island of life on fumes, trying spiritual ATM workarounds in our own strength to find out and to figure out the problem on our own. And then Jesus is sitting there asking, what do you want me to do for you? We're trying to figure it out on our own. And he stands there and he says, what do you want me to do for you? Go back to him, right? Like run to him. Ask specifically. He's asking you and me to tell him specifically what we need from him. He's not afraid of your request. This is what's going on. And as we watch how detours in our life become the doorways for something better, we go from sight that leads to following. And that's what we see happen in this text. They go from need to request. This blind beggar goes from seeing to obeying. And so as we close this morning, let me call us to 3 very simple challenges. In theory, they're going to be difficult to do, but the number one is this. If we're going to put this into motion, I would challenge us to pray specifically. Pray specifically. What do you want me to do for you? He's asking you the question. Tell him. Pray specifically. Name the thing. Lord, let me recover my sight in, and you tell him. Right? I know that praying specifically seems really scary. I get it. And if I'm being super transparent, it was a point of conversation with me and several people in my life, and then even on our staff in the last couple of weeks. I'm like, how do we do that? Can we do that? Are we supposed to do that? To pray specifically. What happens when I pray specifically and he doesn't do what you're saying that he should do? First off, I'm not saying that he's gonna tell you and give you exactly what you're asking. He's asking you to bring the request and then to faithfully sit and trust his sovereignty. And it's scary. I know that, but I believe that Jesus would much rather you bring a very risky request than to sit down and keep a safe distance. Number 2, challenge us to follow publicly, right? Take a visible step. Join a life group. Start serving somewhere. If you are a recent Christ follower or you've been in Christ for a long time, but you've never been obedient in baptism, take that step and go through the waters of baptism as a believer. 4 families just stood on this stage to publicly take a step and say, hey, I know as a parent, I'm gonna get it wrong sometimes, but I wanna raise my children in a home that honors and fears the Lord. So church, will you help me? That's scary to ask a room full of people to say, hey man, I love you on a great day, but on a bad day, look at you and say, you can do better and I'm praying for you that you will. But they did. When we put our faith public, it's not just so that we can get some relief to say, I am doing a decent job, but it's so that as a believer that we will grow in maturity. Lastly, we'll challenge us to leverage our story. Tell someone this week how God has come through and what Jesus has opened your eyes to through your journey. Because this is the reality. There are people in your life that if you will trust him and have enough faith to share your story with somebody who is walking a similar road as you, and you will be faithful to do so. It is your life, follow me. This is your life. If you'll let somebody else look through your lens, it'll be your journey and your story that is gonna bring Jesus into focus for them. Share your story. Let people step into your brokenness and your healing moments so that they can maybe for the first time understand who Jesus really is and bring Jesus into focus for them. King is still stopping. He is still asking, and he is still giving sight. Let's answer him. Let me pray for us this morning.